Hi, good morning and welcome. This is Seek Sustainable Japan. I'm JJWalsh here in Hiroshima. We are live and I am with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Tove Kinooka in Yokohama, Japan.
And it is the end of November. We're starting to feel the chill. How you feeling in Yokohama? You seeing the beautiful autumn colors?
It's really quite beautiful, actually. So it was, I think, 6 degrees when I went to the station with my son this morning. The leaves are out. We're all sort of changing color in the park around. Much later than usual, but it is very beautiful.
Very beautiful. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I've been doing tours on Miyajima, and suddenly we're seeing all the Japanese maple turning the orange and the red. And oh, it's just such a beautiful time of year.
It is
My
amazing.
favorite temple, Daishoin Temple, is doing a light up event right now
Mm-hmm.
because of the autumn leaves. So you can go and visit the temple at night
Oh,
and see
fantastic.
it all lit up.
Yeah,
It's really, really magical. Wonderful.
yeah.
Now, you might notice from my t shirt, this is my house. I
Oh,
have an
wow.
old traditional house. These are
Yeah.
my kids many years ago. But I went to the Minka Khan event this month, which is a gathering of all people who love traditional Japanese houses, rural life. And it was just a fantastic event. It started with a forest walk.
Oh,
So
wow.
I made sure I could get there to go on this forest walk together. The local forest expert who took us on the walk was explaining how a lot of the trees, why they were planted so close together. It was an initiative from the government. They got a little bit of money. So they just covered hillsides, and this happened
Mhm.
all over Japan. With the same kind of tree is a problem. So he was showing how a lot of the trees have some damage from the insects. So the carpenters don't want it because they want the beautiful wood instead. And so he was also showing us how they're thinning the forest, adding more diverse trees. He introduced us to a young woman who was working with them, who's a lacquer artist. She's
Oh.
studying how to make lacquer. And so, in honor of her, they're also adding lacquer trees in the new area so that the next generation in the future can have better access to lacquer trees.
That's
It's just
fantastic.
so
Yeah.
exciting. And
Mm.
then with that idea that what do you do with wood that's perfectly good, perfectly strong, but it's not as beautiful? Well, they took us next to a place where they showed us how they do yakisugi,
Huh.
burning the cedar. And
Yeah.
so they have these three planks of wood together. They just put sawdust in the bottom so no chemicals are added. And
Mhm.
then they just light it on fire. The guy at the top was like a chimney of smoke coming out, really hot
Yeah.
flames. And they do it just for a couple minutes and then they get water on it, and then you have this beautiful
Mhm.
yakisugi burned wood, which of course is more fire resistant,
Yep.
but also they say it has a bit of insulation because it
Mhm.
expands the wood a little bit. Of
Interesting.
course, it looks beautiful as well,
Mm.
right? And you don't see any of the damage from
Yep.
insects or anything else. You're covering that.
Mhm.
The They only do yakisugi on one side. That
Mhm.
was interesting for me to learn. I thought it was both sides.
Right.
Anyway, I learned so much. And then I've always loved yakisugi. It's so beautiful. And then they took us to one of the renovated houses where the whole outside, of course, is covered in the yakisugi and the inside has been renovated so beautifully. So it was just such a
Amazing.
beautiful,
Yeah.
like all parts of the same problem. How are
Mhm.
these people working together?
Yep.
What you can do, like, so inspiring. It was really wonderful.
That's fantastic. It's such a great example, I think, of when you sort of start opening your eyes and sort of zooming out to do what we call the sort of the ecosystem thinking that we talk about in our client work, but sort of not looking at just one problem. So sort of, okay, damaged wood, can't be used. What are we going to do with that? Because our usual market won't take it. To actually zoom out and go, well, what could we do with that? What are the alternatives? And that's helping out somebody else and solving another problem there. It's, yeah, a really nice example of that, I think.
And you might have seen it when you went to Kamikatsu, but the onsen hotel there, when I
Yeah.
visited, they were talking about funding the thinning of the local forests,
Yes.
and they're using that wood,
Yeah.
using it for keeping their onsens hot, which they need, and
Yeah.
heating the hotel. So using it as a biofuel, and
Yeah.
some people might think that's wasteful, but by buying it that way, they're
Mhm.
helping to thin the forest, which is so necessary.
Yeah.
So it that was really exciting to hear about when I
Yeah.
went there as well.
Exactly. 'Cause in the economic terms, right, that's funding then if they're able to sell it, it's funding the work in the forest, the management there.
Absolutely.
So it makes it sustainable for everyone then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, other parts of the Minka Con that I was a part of, so just seeing everybody talking together. They had great food trucks. Here, Milo was one of the main speakers. He's an amazing architect who does some really wonderful renovation work of old houses, making beautiful guest houses. He was one of the speakers, and
Mhm.
just a lot of people who attended as well, and their stories about love of rural Japan, buying old houses, renovating. I was part of a YouTube panel. So here we have Maigo Mika, who is based in Kochi. She
Mhm.
has a fantastic YouTube channel. Some of her videos have had millions of views.
Oh, wow.
And so she was giving insights not only about running the YouTube,
Hmm.
but like telling stories and how she's renovated her old house as well.
Yeah.
And then I was moderating the Women of Minka panel.
Hmm.
Three amazing women. On the left, she has been very passionate about natural organic indigo farming, as well as using the dyes in a small thatch roof village in rural Kyoto. And
Mhm.
then in the middle, she is talking about her filmmaking obsession with the 72 micro seasons in Japan. And then on the right, she was talking about living in a rural area, developing community through making an eatery out of an
Hmm.
old house with her Japanese husband. And, just so
Yeah.
many fascinating, wonderful stories
Mm.
and so inspiring, but also it's just so much of their advice is practical.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, oh, wouldn't it be nice kind of
Mm.
idea, but these are people who've actually done it and they
Yeah.
know the ins and outs of it. They tell
Mhm.
you the hard truth, but also the benefits and
Yeah.
how it's really economical. It's really a low cost of living if you're thinking of alternatives, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great to have these case studies, right? So, like you say, inspiring, but also just the practical of, what their learnings coming out of this, and what could we then perhaps do ourselves, and how can we apply those learnings? So, yeah, really useful to have examples like that. Otherwise, where do you start? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. You were in Munich for the
Yes.
One Young World. Can you tell us about
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, great. So the Munich summit. So every year, One Young World, which is a gathering of around just over 2,000 young leaders, young change makers from over 190 countries. They come together, different city each year. This year was Munich, and it's always interesting to see there are big sort of plenary themes every year. So this year's big themes were things like circular economy. We also had anti-hate, which was the first time we'd seen that on a sort of on the plenary list. Um, Gosh, what else was there? Peace and reconciliation. So it was a really wide-ranging sort of sustainability conference. Um, but sort of the key learnings coming out of that, one of them just related to what you were just talking about there, the stories, actually. And one of the things that we are always talking about and sort of helping our clients with is how do you engage people in this conversation around sustainability, right? How do you get people in your companies to understand why this is important? And you can see this was a really interesting panel there. Henkel make adhesives, so adhesives for all kinds of items. We've probably all got them in our houses around us. Um, and they were talking about how they are needing to change the adhesives they're using so that things can be undone at the end of life. So for years, it was just you wanted things to stick together for as long as possible so that the product wouldn't sort of come apart, and that was their strength and what they were known for. But now, if they're designing for end of life recycling and a circular economy, they need to rethink how they're doing that. And so these adhesives, they're having to change so that they can then be undone at the end, and things can be recycled and without causing chemical pollution and da da da. But how do they communicate that science to their employees, of course, but also their sort of other stakeholders in their value chain, their clients, their customers, their partners, their suppliers? They've really had to think very carefully about how they tell this story in a way that people are going to understand, find relevant, find inspiring or motivating enough to actually make them change their behaviors, or to want to get involved in sort of building solutions together. And that came through really strongly, I think, in pretty much all of the topic areas covered across the 4 days of the conference, that this storytelling piece and engaging, how you engage with people in this conversation, is so important. Um, so that was a great learning, I think, for our delegates that we took, because they're now coming back. We're back in Japan. They actually, tomorrow we start to kick off the projects. So they're coming together to look at, what are the areas, the big problems they want to solve, or the areas of interest for them that also make sense with their company, and then to find project ideas and start to put those into action. So they really need to be thinking about what is the story that we're telling here? What's the current narrative around this issue? How do we flip that narrative into a positive one, but one that will also engage other people?
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting
Mm.
and so important to think about those circular value chains,
Yep.
right, along the way, and how
Mm.
you can design things for reuse.
Yeah,
We were talking about kamikatsu earlier. Of course, that's a big thing that they
that's it.
do,
Yeah,
is bringing businesses from around Japan, bringing the designers
yep,
to the end stage, and like a electric carpet, it has lots of different kinds of
yep,
materials. So getting the designers to try to take it apart, realizing how
yeah,
difficult it is,
yeah,
and then maybe we should design it in a different way. Like just
exactly.
you need
Yeah,
that interaction, you need that engagement so
yeah,
much, right?
yeah. No, it's funny when we went to Kamikatsu a few years ago with a client, and we did that sort of Sodai Gomi challenge, the big garbage challenge, right? Where they were working in teams and they had to dismantle everyday items that had come to end of life. That was such a big learning. So the hot carpet was one that was an absolute nightmare to strip out all the wiring, but the suitcase was one of the worst. How on earth, there are so many different materials bonded together in a way which there is no way those are going to come apart. They can't therefore be reused. It was a real wake up call for them, I think, looking at, oh my gosh, okay, so how do we design so that
Absolutely.
it can be
Yeah. And
recycled?
then thinking about adhesives, which is
Yeah,
something like we often don't think about,
yeah.
but even like masking tape or something
Mm,
is, could you make a masking tape that is biodegradable, that
yep,
would be compostable?
mm,
These are things people are thinking about. Even
yeah,
plastic bags that could go back to nature, that
yeah,
are made from plants. We know there are people developing these
yes,
strategies and they
yeah.
are better, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it takes a huge shift in mindset, um, and the narrative has got to be there as well. If people don't get the why, they're not going to change their behaviors.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so important. It also looked like you went to a London climate conflict event. That looks fascinating. Can you tell us about that?
So yeah, this was I was in London for some meetings the week before One Young World, and this was an incredibly interesting panel. From so Andrew Gilmore has a background in humanitarian work, human rights, many decades of advising high level on that. He's currently involved in sort of advising on the Gaza situation to the UN and so on. But he's written this book on climate and conflict. And so it was a discussion between him and a BBC journalist who has covered these kind of issues for many years as well, particularly from the conflict perspective. And they were talking about, or Andrew Gilmore was talking about through his work, how he's seen the connections between the climate crisis, the situation, and how that is fueling conflict. It could be that it's sort of pushing people out if it's flooding or extreme weather events that are causing people to move, which then means they move to somewhere that perhaps they're going to come into conflict with people with different values or different beliefs and so on. It's also sort of if people are, or if herdsmen, for example, are encroaching on lands where crops are being grown, then that's starting to cause conflict as well. So it was really interesting to look at how these two things are so intensely connected. And there were a lot of there was Q&A afterwards as well, and quite a few people in the audience were working on sort of climate issues and things, and I don't think many of them had thought that much before about this. So there were a lot of good questions sort of digging further into that and exploring some specific examples. So yeah, it was a really interesting session. Two topics which you don't often see put together, but of course it's all interconnected.
It's so important
Mm.
to make those connections, and that reminds me so much of the kinds of things that they're talking about at COP30, which just
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah,
I was listening to Outrage and Optimism, the amazing
it's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
podcasters who are so embedded and have so much experience in that
Mm.
process of the conference of the parties, from Kyoto Agreement to
Yeah.
the Paris Agreement, all of these changes. But overall, it seems like a lot of people were disappointed that there was no countdown to phasing out
Yeah,
fossil fuels was the big disappointment, right?
absolutely.
But you came across a really interesting summary. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
So this was from Exeter University, which is actually where I did my undergrad many, many, many years ago. But they have a particularly strong sort of focus there on climate science, and have sort of built that into advisory services and so on. And they asked several people within that sort of department to comment on it. And it was interesting because there were quite mixed responses, I think. So as you said, a lot of disappointment that really we're running out of time. Why do we not yet have the agreement on this? And the frustration, I think, came across very strongly that we're allowing several of the large sort of petrostates to really dictate what most countries. I think it was around 90 countries they were saying we're pushing for, no, we want the phase out actually, and the roadmap to that in the agreement, but that didn't happen because it was derailed by the strength of sort of lobbying by these petrostates. So a lot of
And
frustration
of
around
course,
that.
the big country did not even represent this
Exactly.
year, right?
Exactly.
It was great to see Gavin Newsom of
Yes.
California there,
Yeah.
stepping in, but the leadership of America chose
Yeah.
not to. And so that always
Yeah.
is a big barrier to negotiations, right?
Very
One of the
much.
biggest emitters. One of
Exactly.
the yeah.
But it was interesting hearing, thinking of Outrage and Optimism, Christiana Figueres' kind of take on that was that, okay, well, you're not here, so you don't get to dictate what we do here. So it was an opportunity in that sense that perhaps the I don't want to use the word bullying, but really that's a lot of what it is going on that sort of has happened from the US leadership in the past. Whereas, other people said, well, we need them on board because of the scale. And like you say, they're one of the biggest emitters, if not the one. So
And
um,
isn't
not
there
having them
seems to
there.
be a real push now from consumers
Yeah.
who are ready and looking for better
Yes.
options.
Yeah.
And so it's going to hurt these countries that are not joining
Absolutely. Yeah.
and making the aims together, because consumers are ready
Yeah.
to make better choices. And so
Yes.
I think it's going to hurt these countries that are saying fossil fuels are the way. We know that's
Exactly.
not the way.
Yeah.
Consumers are making better
Yeah.
choices.
Exactly. And there are better choices out there now. And I think that was sort of in that summary I was reading from Exeter, that was one of the sort of the positive things that came out, saying, well, there are now, we know that renewable energy works, it's available, it's affordable. So therefore, this is not a matter of if it's going to take over, it's when. And yes, people from some areas can drag their feet on that because they've got conflicting interests. But like you say, that the choices are out there, and I think people are beginning to be more conscious of that. But also the fact, sort of one of the people in the summary made the point that if imagine where we would be now if the COP discussions didn't happen at all. So yes, I can understand there's a lot of frustration with really this is just a talk show and is actually anything happening. But if we weren't having that, who knows what would be the state right now. At least we're kind of making slow progress, and these discussions are being had. The science has been heard. The governments are talking together, which is a lot better than if they weren't. Yes, it's not enough and it's not fast enough, but it's still progress in a sense.
And there's always positive takeaways.
Absolutely.
I was talking with students about it in international business and showcasing how the Japanese businesses
Mm.
who were at COP, how they're featuring
Yeah.
reuse of solar technology, things that are not really being done. And
Mhm.
that's really exciting. So
Yep.
even if the big agreement seems disappointing, there's so much happening
Yeah.
which is positive and proactive and
Yeah.
is making good changes for the future.
Exactly. And I think the key word you mentioned is there was opportunity, right? That I think businesses, whatever the happening at a governmental level, the businesses see this as the opportunity as well. Therefore, they're going to go where the opportunities are and where the future business is. So hopefully that's going to accelerate sort of progress in the right direction there.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's done every year
Yeah.
gives us an opportunity again to get enthusiasm going,
Yeah.
have those behind the scenes discussions,
Yeah.
and be ready for next year to really make
Exactly.
that fossil
Yeah.
fuel phase out happen. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yes.
Awesome. I had at the beginning of the month, I had an amazing experience with one of my favorite, most inspiring people I've ever met, Alex Kerr. Now, you might know him as an author of many wonderful books on Japan. He's been a Japanologist, as he describes himself.
Mhm.
He just loves Japan and Japan culture so much. And so it was just such a pleasure to be invited to walk around with him in Kagawa-ken for
Ooh.
3 days
Mhm.
and just to have all these deep Japan culture experiences, things that I've never done for over 30 years in Japan. And this is a thing organized by a company called One Story. You can find them One Story
Yeah.
Traveler on Instagram. And they're developing these 3-day deep experiences, walk around with Alex
Mhm.
Kerr, and he translates, but also it's not just translating from the shrine priests or the Buddhist monks
Mm.
or the artisans, but he's adding his insights
Mm.
and
Yeah.
his knowledge to the discussion and to what he's saying.
Mhm.
And so it was just amazing. And I learned so much, and I would highly recommend it to
Mhm.
anyone really deeply interested in Japanese culture. So
Amazing.
here we are in front of a temple. He's talking about the Neo Guardians, and all the details. And then he has been studying tea ceremony for so many years. So
Mhm.
even doing tea ceremony with him was just fascinating because
Yeah.
he has all these ways of explaining things that
Mhm.
he's learned over many years that you would have to study for many years to
Yeah.
get those insights, right?
Mhm.
And then,
Fantastic.
yeah, it's just fascinating. We went to a bonsai, so
Oh,
we
wow.
saw we saw a lot of the artisans at work and then tried a little bit, but then you appreciate how hard it is. Like, this is a special kind of lacquer from Kagawa
Mhm.
where they paint it with different colored lacquer and then they carve into it at
Oh,
different
wow.
levels. So you're bringing out different
Yeah.
colors,
That's
and it's
amazing.
just so difficult to do.
Yeah.
And you appreciate it so much
Mm.
after you try a little bit, and then you
Yeah.
see these beautiful artworks. And it's so also really inspiring and so positive to see how they have a school
Yeah.
where students from around the world, from around Asia and other countries, as well as Japan, are coming and
Mhm.
learning these traditional crafts, but not necessarily to make boxes and things
Hmm.
that they used to sell lacquer, but to make art. These are
Mhm.
artists who want to learn this craft to
Yeah.
do their own art. And
Mhm.
I that was the first time I really started thinking about that as a way to preserve these traditional crafts which are being
Yeah.
lost in Japan,
Mhm.
is we have to give young people the freedom to learn it
Yeah.
and then change it. And
Yes.
that still protects the traditions and the culture, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a really good sort of way of looking at it, isn't it? It's not just that they're going to make the same things, but to take those techniques and the knowledge and the wisdom that comes with that and look at what are different ways to use that now. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful to see that evolving.
Amazing.
Mm.
And so speaking of crafts, I just went to a marché in Takehara. We are developing a sustainable tourism tour in Takehara, the salt
Nice.
sake
Mhm.
town. And I was so excited to come across this ironworks maker, and he's making all these beautiful handcrafted things. What do you, am I, is it right? You don't say iron crafts where, oh, blacksmith. Okay,
Blacksmith.
that's what it
Blacksmith.
is. Yeah. And it's just once I picked it up, like,
Yeah.
he was showing me the process of
Mhm.
how it's made from a slab of steel or iron
Yeah.
and all the ways, and then you pick it up and you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is made by someone. Like, this is
Yes, not a
really
machine.
beautifully
Mhm.
crafted."
Mhm.
And that's what Asby Brown is going to join the show and talk about tomorrow, is how the handcrafted parts of traditional houses and
Mhm.
so much culture in Japan, that to us as humans,
Yeah.
that really connects to us.
Mm.
And that makes us feel happy and comfortable and excited because it was made by a human.
Yeah.
So, as we're talking about this switch to AI and robots and everything, we have to remember actually to make ourselves happy, we
Yeah.
kind of need people who are making things by hand
Yes.
still,
Yeah.
because that's going to connect to us on a different level, right?
Very much. That's kind of a nice counterbalance, isn't it, to the technology, which is wonderful in many ways. But yeah, I like the fact we've got that balance coming in as well.
Yeah. So it was great to see him. I saw him at the Minka Con, and then he'll be on the show tomorrow. And that was something that he was talking about at the Minka Con event this year. And I
Mhm,
know a lot of people would really benefit from hearing that. So definitely
mhm.
tune
Yeah.
in tomorrow. Another thing I found at the Marché, I know a lot of people are
Mhm.
shopping right now. So it's a good time to mention things like this. So I found this guy who's growing his own peppers,
Hmm.
and I think he's in Okayama, he's based.
Yeah.
And so all these beautiful, like, hot pepper, garlic sauces. This is garlic and miso
Sounds so
paste,
good.
right? So if you can
Yeah.
find these things, I'm sure you can in your
Mhm.
area. Look for them at festivals, food, farmers markets, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And try to find reusable packaging, so glass and metal. This can be recycled in Japan, or you can reuse it, right? These are things it's worth thinking about now
Yeah.
as we're buying things for the holiday season, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. No, it's a great way to support the local sort of, well, local economy, I guess, artisans, farmers, and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
it's exciting. I think
Yes.
it's more interesting, and usually it's really high quality, and
Yeah.
it has a good story with it that you can tell people when you give it to them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
because you're interested in it, they're going to be more interested in it.
Wins all round.
Wins all around. And then I had the chance the other day to talk with Stuart, who is planning the Minka Summit for
Okay.
next year. And that will be at Hanase Village, which is in rural Kyoto, April 24, 25, 26. So mark your calendars. It's always a great event as well. Hanase Village is lovely. So here is one of the workshops. I think they're doing thatch workshops, so showing you how thatch roofs are made. But he has some great speakers coming this year. This is Jeff Berglund, and he will be the keynote speaker this year. But one thing I'm really excited about is if you go on Friday, you can go and see Jeff Berglund's beautiful riverside matcha
Ooh,
in Kyoto, and
mhm,
he'll give you a walk through his beautiful old traditional house and
fantastic.
tell you all the stories of all the parts and how it's been renovated, what the history is, and I love that kind of thing. So I am definitely crossing off all my work. I'm gonna get there right from the get-go.
Brilliant. Yeah,
So I would highly recommend, if anybody loves Japanese culture, traditional houses, you should really try to get there for the Minka Summit.
wonderful. Oh, that sounds like an amazing experience.
Tova, was there anything else? I think that's our 30 minutes. You got anything quick?
Yeah, well, just maybe one point related to that was something came up on my social media feed yesterday about something called Homework Village
Oh,
um,
yes.
in sort of the extended Tokyo area where they're repurposing old schools. So a lot of school buildings, because the population's shrinking, particularly the younger population, they are repurposing schools. And this one has done a great job, I think, of creating this community hub. You can see it's got gardens there, people can go and work. It's got their little sort of markets, events. You can rent event space there. It's got even a sort of startup advisory sort of hub there as well. So what a great way to repurpose a building. Actually, these, large buildings very often that just stand there empty and sad and unused. But what a great way to kind of revitalize the community and create a space that's really practical, really usable, really valuable for the whole community. So I thought that was a great example to
That
see.
is, because often we don't have to knock down the buildings. They're already there.
Exactly.
They're stable. They work.
Yeah,
What can we do to just tweak it, rethink
exactly.
it,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
love that idea, and we're
Mm,
all always looking at new co-working spaces all over
yeah,
Japan, especially Tokyo area. A lot of people
exactly.
really
Yeah.
seeking these out, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I thought, it's great to see that, and it would be good to see more of those kind of things coming up as a great way to kind of revitalize communities as well, not just reusing the space itself, but to give a community a hub, somewhere to get together and do things. So
And
yeah,
that could even bring in people to the
yeah,
community,
absolutely.
knowing that there is this
Yeah.
shared co-working space. So
Mhm.
if you wanna start a business in a rural area, you don't have
Yeah,
to rent a business space. You can
exactly.
start with the
Yeah.
co-working space, right?
Yeah. And if it's all together, then people are more likely to come there and see your business, right?
And
More
collaborate
quickly.
too. You
Yeah,
might have
exactly.
businesses collaborating for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So many benefits. So I thought that was such a positive example, and looking forward to seeing more of those around.
Fantastic. Well, that is our time. Thank you so much, Tova.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And as always, if you're watching this on replay, add your questions and comments below, and we promise to respond and send you the links you need.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. See you next